So yesterday I was working on some report generation at InVision, and some of the reports are really quickly to generate, and some of the reports take a few seconds, sometimes 10, 20, 30 seconds. And I wanted to see if there was a way that I could tap into the report generation lifecycle such that I could warn the user that the report may take a little while. And then once the report is generated and the user is prompted to download the report, I could hide that warning. So to do this, I ended up using a tracer cookie, which gets set by the report generation and then monitored by the client-side code. So to look at this, I have this report CFM, a Cold Fusion page, which takes a delay, which is just used to simulate the processing time. And if we look at what report is doing, here we take that delay. We just use the sleep command again to simulate the processing time for the report itself. I'm then going to return the content of the report using Content-Disposition attachment. That's what's going to cause the user to get prompted for the download. But what you'll see is that I'm also accepting this optional report ID value, which if it exists, I'm going to use to set a cookie with the same name. And the cookie is going to live for a brief period of time, just a minute before it expires. So what the goal of this cookie is to provide proof to the client-side code that this report has been generated, the content and the headers have been flushed to the client, and the user has been prompted to download the report. So let's take a look at how this report ID gets added, because if we look back here at my report links, you can see it's just the report CFM and the delay. So what we're going to use is event delegation on the document to listen for click events. If the click comes from a report link, we're going to inject a report ID and then start watching for the prompt, the download prompt for the user. So if we look at the inject report ID, you can see we come up with a unique token based on the current UTC millisecond timestamp. We then grab the href from the link that's triggered, from which the click was triggered. We strip out any existing report ID from the URL, and then we add our new report ID. Then we set that back into the href of the link. Now the great thing about this is that this allows us to augment the anchor's href without disrupting the native behavior of the browser. Now after we inject the report ID, you can see we return it and then pass it through to this watch for report prompt. And what this is going to do is show an overlay, and here we can see the overlay. Just says your report is being generated. Depending on the report, it may take a few moments, right? So once we get that report ID, we show that overlay, and then we start an interval, and that interval is going to start polling the document.cookie payload, looking for that unique report ID that we appended to the URL, which will now become part of the set cookie header response from the report generation. And once that cookie exists, or some timeout has been passed, we simply remove the overlay and clear the timer. So let's take a look at how that works in the browser. So here are my reports, and if we open one, you can see there's my overlay, which gets closed the moment the download gets prompted and the download automatically happens. And what we can see from our URL here is that we're including both the delay of the browser, or the delay of the report generation, and that unique report ID. And you can see as our reports get progressively longer, the overlay stays around for longer, 3 seconds. We can do one for 5 seconds. So you can see it's going to stick around until that cookie shows up, at which point it closes the overlay and kills the timer, the interval. And the nice thing about this too is that if I were to open this up in another tab, it continues to work because it's just looking for the cookie. So it's an interesting technique. Once I got it working, to be honest, I'm not even sure if I really like the experience. I think part of me would just rather have this open up in a new tab, because that allows the user to open up multiple tabs, run multiple reports in parallel, and the user experience is actually pretty decent. But it's an interesting technique to have in the back of my mind. This idea of having tracer cookies to track download prompts, I think, is also very interesting. Again, just a nice thing to have tucked away in case I ever do need to implement something like this.